After a 2-year interval due to the COVID pandemic, Model Rail Scotland has returned to the major show scene in Britain at its home in the Scottish Event Campus in Glasgow. This video covers the N-scale layouts on display. Tyock Junction is an N-gauge layout by the Elgin Model Railway Club. During the Second World War, the phrase "somewhere in Britain" was used in the interests of security and to confuse the enemy. The same phrase applies to Tyock Junction, not for those reasons, but because we don't know exactly where it is. The name comes from the burn the Tyock that runs behind our club premises, so from that point of view it is based in Scotland. However, the name also sounds like it could come from the West Country or possibly Wales. The visual aspects of the layout do not help either. At one end, the seawall with the line running through the tunnels, smallish Dawlish, would tend to support the West Country, but the farm scene at the opposite end and the hills of the background could place it anywhere from South Downs to Wales or Scotland. It is certainly not a city or an industrial conurbation. One advantage is that it means there are no restrictions to running stock for a particular area. The layout has a double mainline track running from one big town to another big town. The station has a passing loop, also giving access to somewhere smaller, with the branch passing underneath the main line and heading down the valley. Actually a small fiddle yard and run-round loop to allow trains to return. The station is well serviced by a 2-road steam shed and a 2-road diesel maintenance depot. And there are also 2 sets of goods yards for interchange operations and to service industries off-scene. Set in the transition period loosely, it also gives us flexibility to run what we want to. Currently, the layout is analogue operated with plans to convert to DCC, but as we only have access to 2 DCC fitted locos at present, this is not an immediate priority. King Street, modelled in N-gauge, was presented by the Moray Model Railway Group. King Street is a terminal station for cross-country and suburban services in Scotland. It is loosely based on a station with a regal name in a Scottish city. There is a diesel depot nearby, and all services leaving the station enter a tunnel just after departure. Further out there is a freight complex where trains are dispatched cross-country without fouling the main line. Many liveries are shown, from blue-grey to Scottish swoosh, as well as different freight liveries. The units are DCC.
My name's Irwin Keith. This model was the concept of Stan Bierman, and unfortunately he died in August, so we've made a plate on his behalf. And his idea was that we build a distillery and yeast factory looking at the 80s, and the natural choice was where we have our club rooms. There is our club room. But we took each of the buildings that we thought we could put in this layout and drew them and made them exactly how they were, down to the stone colouring. And so therefore that is our kind of concept. They were 37s, 27s, used to come in and they used to shunt the yeast fans into, they did all the shunting from the main line into the yard. But but we have made it so that we have special little engines that do the shunting. So there's a transfer sidings there.
How big is it?
How big is it? I think it's 14 feet.
How many boards is that?
There's 3 boards. Two boards and the transversal board.
And what are you running? Are you running DC or DCC?
We are running analog DC.
And where are they sourced from? Is like Backman, is it? Or
the source is from anywhere, whether it's Apple, Green Parish, Backman.
and operating? How do you normally operate?
Operates with 2 operators. 1 yard with the yard, Bartos, and 1, I think that'll be Alec will do that, the main line. And the trains come from the transversal into the main line, shunt back into the exchange sidings where you see the coal wagons and the brake van. They're transferred, operated by the main line, and then they leave the wagons etc. there, and what happens is the yard engine comes and collects them and shunts them where they are.
Barton Road, modelled in N gauge, was presented by Ben Pollard. Barton Road is a DCC operated BR Western Region triangular junction layout located in the rundown suburbs of Bristol in the early 70s. This formerly significant junction originally provided a link between the GWR Bristol South Wales Main Line and the Midland Railway's Mangots Field Bath Green Park Line. However, the closure of the MR route in the late 60s rendered the link redundant, and it was subsequently lifted. What remained was used to serve the local freight concentration depot, which itself is now obsolete and outmoded and in the process of being run down. Further track rationalisation has started to take place, including the closure of the up and down slow platforms in the station and severing of the connection between the main line and the branch line down to the docks in the east facing side of the triangle. The freight only sides of the triangle converge into a set of exchange sidings which lie on the track bed of the former cord line. Here rakes of wagons are split and then shunted to various railheads for loading or unloading. A local cement distribution terminal, a scrap metal merchant which now occupies the former fresh produce siding, and van traffic for the goods warehouse, as well as P-wagon traffic and passing trains arriving and collecting wagons for distribution elsewhere. Express passenger and parcel services rush by, and the local stopper and goods trains trundle past on the main line of the triangle. Traction consists predominantly of diesel hydraulics running alongside classes 25, 31, 37, 46, 47 and local DMU services, as well as the odd interloper, plus a 6-car DEMU Pullman set recently transferred from the Midland region. Barton Road features several locomotives and DMUs fitted with the latest Digitrains active drive sound decoders. Tuerland is an N-gauge model by the Clydeside Model Railway Club. We were presented with a door and some N-gauge track, and after some work, Tuerland was the result. The name is not imaginative, as Tuer is German for door, and so the layout is a land built on a door. Falla and Keighley were the source of most of the building kits, and the track plan is basically a double track oval with some sidings thrown in to make things a wee bit more interesting. Some careful wiring means that children can operate the layout, whilst a supervising Clydeside member can prevent any disasters. With children in mind, the trains are chosen for their colours rather than any authenticity to a country or region or protocol. Lisworth Bay by John Spence is modelled in N-gauge. The London and South Western Railway forged its way southwest during the railway age of the 19th century, sprouting branches to coastal towns on its way. Lisworth Bay was one of these. Although originally a terminus during the Great War, the line was extended to serve a nearby ordnance depot, and the road access to the station was interrupted by the installation of the level crossing across the extension. Improvements in the roads in the post-World War II years also saw a decline in its use, and the extension was due to be lifted during the 1950s. However, the increased tension of the Cold War years encouraged the government to retain it as a precautionary measure. The branch was rationalised shortly after nationalisation and became a single line. The track plan simplified, and part of the original down line retained only as a storage siding. Portions of express passenger services split at various stations en route reached the terminus alongside local passenger workings, freight, parcels, newspaper and milk traffic. The whole branch to Lisworth Bay was condemned to be closed as part of the beaching report, and the trains last ran in the early autumn of 1966. The track bed has recently become a cycle route. The layout is modular, with the fiddle yard at 90 degrees to the scenic section. The original format featured only the station approach and terminus, but has been extended by the addition of 2 more boards. The first featuring a farm and the second a 60-foot high viaduct over the River Liss. I first featured this N-gauge layout, St Andrews and Guardbridge, when it debuted at the St Andrews Model Railway Show in 2019. Built by members of the East Neuk Model Railway Club, I spoke with Aaron Aird back then, who gave me information on how the layout was built.
I'm here with Aaron from the East Neuk Model Railway Club.
The new layout, Guardbridge and St Andrews, an N-gauge layout, based in the late 50s through to the point when the coastline shut in 1965. The layout's been a long time in its creation, you could say. It's based on, Guardbridge is pretty much accurate in its size. St Andrews' size a wee bit foreshortened, just to try and get it to work in on the available baseboards. All the buildings are all scratch built, and it's where the work goes in. I think the pair of us that have done the buildings, Duncan Stewart and myself, Duncan mostly did Guardbridge and I mostly did St Andrews. Building of the buildings, research, that's what soaks your time up. You learn a lot about the history of an area when you build a prototype. You would never build a layout like that out of your imagination. Take the St Andrews station, well that was the second one in St Andrews. That was only opened and created once the coastline was built. The first one was down at the links where the old Coast Hotel is. You know, so obviously when they built the extension to Crail, the station came up into the town a bit closer. And then in the 50s, they built the bus garage next to it. And they built the bus stances and all in the offices. And in its day, St Andrews was held up as a model of modern transport, station right next to the bus garage and the bus stances. You couldn't have thought of a better way of doing it. It's analogue, it's turn the power on and the trains move. There's no point having sound at an exhibition N-gauge layout. The point work's all controlled, push button, but it's done electronically through a brain. There's modules under the baseboards that control the points. All the points in the fronts are like cobalt motors. The fiddle yard itself goes with other club layouts. There's a lot of money and investment and time and effort goes into building fiddle yards, so you don't build a new one for every layout.